G'day, it's fugitive Australian journalist Shane Young from the website kangaroocourtofaustralia.com. Now I'm about to show you some video evidence which in my mind leaves no doubt that Amy Brown was bribed an extra $300,000 to protect New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet. Now the video evidence is from the New South Wales Parliament on the 7th of September 2022, where Michael Coates-Trotter, who's a #1 public servant in New South Wales and reports directly to the Premier, outlines in minute detail that he's put Amy Brown on notice that he's about to sack her. And he refers to the Graham Head report, he calls it the Head report, and Graham Head investigated the scandal surrounding John Barilaro's appointment to the $500,000 New York job and Amy Brown's involvement in that. So Graham Coates-Trotter, he refers to that, and also at the end of this section of the video you're going to hear him say he's had legal advice from the Crown Solicitor, and you'll hear him go into great detail. He was going to sack her under Section 68, and from his memory it's a 13-week payout instead of sacking her under Section 41, which is a 38-week payout. And given the fact that Graham Head has investigated the matter, he would know exactly why he's sacking her, and given that he's also had legal advice from the Crown Solicitor, he should be extremely certain exactly on what grounds he's going to be sacking her. So let's have a listen to the video evidence and watch his mannerism too. He seems very confident, which is in comparison to the second section I'll show you in a minute. But let's watch this first section now.
And on the 18th of August, I spoke with Ms. Brown and expressed a preliminary view to her that I had formed from reading Mr. Head's report.
What was the preliminary view? What date did you have that conversation?
On the 18th of August.
18th of August. And was it in person or was it on the phone? Or?
It was on the phone.
And you expressed to her a preliminary view?
I expressed a preliminary view, and my preliminary view was and is that she had not satisfactorily performed the function of secretary.
But it gives rise to a breach of Ms. Brown's contract specifically?
Well, it relates to her performance in the role, which is the mechanism, is the contract she signed, which relates to a role description, and then of course there are responsibilities under public servants under the Code of Ethics and Conduct, which
she also has to, according to her contract, comply with at all times.
That's right.
Correct.
Yes.
And so, have you given Ms. Brown indication that, or provided her with notice that you are considering terminating her contract?
So the first step is to form a preliminary review of her performance, which I've done. I've indicated I'm considering the matter under Section 68 of the Government Sector Employment Act. Part 2 sets out the actions that I am contemplating or may contemplate, and one of those is termination.
What other actions can you contemplate?
Well, the other actions under that section include demotion, a reduction in salary. They are somewhat of an ill fit with the Office of Secretary, because they would require the consent of the person for them to be delivered. So termination obviously not, but demotion and the other actions under 68 would require a person's consent from the Office of Secretary. That would not be true of someone in a less senior position.
So just to be clear, you're contemplating action under Section 68 of the GCE Act?
Yeah.
Are you contemplating any action under Section 41?
The preliminary view I've put to Ms. Brown is that I've formed the view that her performance was unsatisfactory, so I'm considering it under Section 68. That's my preliminary view.
Okay.
Now, my view may change in response to any submission she chooses to make to me, but at a preliminary point, I'm dealing with it under Section 68.
Okay. And under that Act, are you able to make that decision upon receipt of any final submissions, or do you have any other hurdles that you have to satisfy?
So the usual course was you would receive a submission in response to a preliminary review about performance, contemplate that, make a decision on performance, then make a decision on what action I would take in response and provide Ms Brown, in this case, with an opportunity to make comment on that before finalising it.
Just in terms of the implications of a termination under Section 68, what are the implications in terms of termination under Section 68 in respect to the entitlements and such? So separation payment or...
A termination under Section 68 attracts a compensation payment from memory of 13 weeks' salary as opposed to 38 weeks' salary under a Section 41 termination.
Okay.
So
is that in lieu of all other, in addition to other entitlements, or...?
Yes, if you had accumulated leave, for example, you would take that with you as well.
So if we're terminating Ms Brown for cause, or we're not, or to be fair, any secretary, in such a scenario, the minimum under that provision is that we still have to pay 13 weeks?
That's correct.
So is there any other provision of the Act that you can terminate Ms Brown under which results in no payment?
Yes, I forget the section, but you can terminate for misconduct, and that attracts no compensation.
So this conduct amounts to a failure to perform the duties, but not misconduct. Is that...
That is my preliminary view, Mr Mookie, after reading Mr Head's report closely and taking advice.
Presumably from Ms Point or others?
No, actually from the Crown Solicitor.
Right.
Now, you would have seen Michael Cooch-Trotter come across as very confident answering questions in relation to Amy Brown and the fact that he's put her on notice he's about to sack her. But compare that to this next section I'm about to show you, where Michael Cooch-Trotter was asked by Daniel Mookie, the Labor MP, whether Amy Brown met directly with the New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet. Michael Cooch-Trotter starts ducking and weaving, starts wiping his forehead, puts a hand on the chin, has a drink of water. Initially he says, oh yes, they did meet, but I'm not too sure when, I'll have to take that on notice. Then later after further questioning, he admits that they met on the same day that Dominic Perrottet misled the Parliament, that there were no further candidates that were suitable, etc. So let's have a listen to that video now.
And just to be clear here, did Ms Brown brief the Premier directly?
Yes, she did.
When did she do that?
I don't know exactly. I can take that on notice and respond to you.
So when you're saying that the incomplete what was the phrase you used? Incomplete and
hence misleading picture.
Incomplete and hence misleading. So
that's actually Mr Head's finding.
Incomplete and hence misleading. Yes, thank you. And that incomplete and hence misleading information was provided to then Minister Ayres.
Yes.
And Premier Perrottet directly by Ms Brown, is your understanding? Directly
to Premier Perrottet. I don't know by what means Ms Brown briefed former Minister Ayres.
And just to be clear here, Mr Secretary, Ms Brown didn't provide you the advice and you provided it to the Premier. She provided it directly to the Premier.
She provided it directly to the Premier.
And did she do that by a phone call, meeting, briefing note?
Face-to-face meeting.
In a meeting, was that on the day that he was required to provide a response to Parliament?
Yes, I think so. And it was in the context of the Premier asking for the purpose of providing information to the Parliament.
Okay, so the Premier explicitly sought this briefing?
Yes.
And then presumably got the briefing?
Yes.
And then relied upon it when in providing evidence to the Parliament in question time that day?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm finding curious about this, Mr Secretary, is that the Premier has certainly made the point that he got briefed by the Minister Ayres, and that in fact the information he provided to the House came from Minister Ayres, not Secretary Brown. And therefore, to the extent to which he misled, it's because he was misled by the Minister, not the Secretary. So what I'm trying to reconcile is, how is that possible if there was an actual face-to-face meeting with the Premier in which the Premier got a direct briefing from the Secretary?
I don't know what the Premier said, but it's entirely possible he was briefed by both Minister Ayres and Ms Brown, but I know that he was briefed by Ms Brown directly.
Okay, was that documented by any chance or not?
So it was my colleague Kate Boyd was present in that discussion, so that's how I know it happened.
Oh, Miss Boyd, come on down.
Sorry, Kate.
Well, was it? Were you there? And did Miss Brown inform the Premier that there were no suitable candidate? And that was despite there being 2 suitable candidates who were capable of appointment?
That is the conclusion reached by Mr Head, yes.
Okay, but you witnessed Miss Brown tell this to the Premier directly?
Yes.
Okay, and was Minister Ayres present? So Minister Ayres was present at the meeting. Okay, so it's possible that in fact what happened was he's only publicly identified Minister Ayres, where in fact he was also told by the Secretary. It's possible. You don't have to comment. Okay, fair enough. Can I just go in respect to just in terms of the implications of a termination under Section 68, what are the implications in terms of termination under Section 68 in respect to the entitlements and such?
A termination under Section 68 attracts a compensation payment from memory of 13 weeks' salary as opposed to 38 weeks' salary under a Section 41 termination.
Okay.
So
is that in lieu of all other, in addition to other entitlements, or?
Yes, if you had accumulated leave, for example, you would take that with you as well.
So, if we're terminating Miss Brown for cause, or we're not, or to be fair, any secretary, in such a scenario, the minimum under that provision is that we still have to pay 13 weeks.
That's correct.
So, is there any other provision of the Act that you can terminate Miss Brown under which results in no payment?
Yes, I forget the section, but you can terminate for misconduct, and that attracts no compensation.
So this conduct amounts to a failure to perform the duties, but not misconduct. Is that?
That is my preliminary view, Mr. Mookie, after reading Mr. Head's report closely and taking advice.
Presumably from Miss Boyd?
No, actually from the Crown Solicitor.
Right. Sorry to point you, but Miss Boyd, you're often a suspect in terms of who provides this advice.
Object to that.
Getting better and better, isn't it? But can I just be clear here? If it is the case that there's been a breach of the code, how does that not amount to misconduct?
I'm uncomfortable about further elaborating on my views inside a process that's yet to complete.
Okay, but you have explicitly...
Can you just be satisfied knowing that I thought very carefully about it, and based on advice, Mr. Head's forensic report and, the application of judgment, the view I formed is that I'm dealing with it on a preliminary basis as a question of poor performance and not misconduct.
Mr. Secretary, can I be satisfied? I'm hard to satisfy, hence the questions, but I take your point. If it is a case, I understand you're in the middle of a process and procedural fairness is owed to lots of people, so I take your point of not pushing too much beyond that part of it.
Now, you would have seen towards the end of that video that Michael Coots-Trotter palmed off the questioning to a lady who was also on the panel answering questions, and you would have seen her duck and weave too. She initially said, oh yes, that's what it says in the Head report, and Daniel Mookie said, no, you were there, what did you hear? She didn't want to give any first-hand evidence herself. She knew exactly what she was doing, ducking and weaving. In fact, they're all ducking and weaving, and we know that. They're all perjuring themselves, and hopefully ICAC are investigating. They'll have public hearings, and we'll hopefully get somewhere near to the bottom of it. I don't think we'll ever get to the total bottom of it, but they're all trying to protect the New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet. Now, if you put those two pieces of evidence together, you'll see that initially on the 7th of September, they were going to pay Amy Brown 13 weeks, which is $153,000. But somewhere along the lines, and I think it's that last piece of questioning, the last piece of video, which they weren't prepared for, that put Amy Brown in the box seat, because she could have gone public and said, no, they were lying at the budget estimates hearing. and she'd probably use that to negotiate herself a sacking under Section 41, which gives her a $450,000 payout, an extra 300 grand. So I think there's a lot more to come from this, and I'll keep on investigating. Now my Patreon account, which I set up just over a month ago, is up to 157 supporters who have committed to $1,301 a month. Now, if you're looking for a reason why you should support, well, the video you just watched is a prime example. You won't find it elsewhere. And you can donate from $3, $5, $7, $10, $15, $20 a month, whatever suits your budget. Most people can afford $3 or $5 a month. And please share this video on Twitter and Facebook, etc. Other than that, thank you for your time and have a good day.